I still remember the exact moment she said it. We were sitting on the edge of the worn-out couch in my tiny apartment, the kind of couch that sighs under your weight and seems to remember every conversation you've ever had. Outside, the city lights flickered through the blinds, painting stripes of gold and gray across the room. She looked at me, eyes heavy with something I couldn't quite name, and whispered, almost like she was confessing a crime, "I feel guilty about this." I froze for a second. My mind raced, trying to figure out what she meant. Guilty? Guilty about what? The words hung in the air, thick and sticky, and for a moment I couldn't even speak. She didn't meet my eyes. She never does when she's on the verge of telling me something that could shatter everything. I wanted to say the wrong thing, but instead, I laughed, quietly, nervously, and I replied, "I feel lucky instead." Lucky? Lucky for what? Lucky that she was here, that she trusted me enough to tell me this, or that somehow, in the chaos of whatever she was feeling, I still had a place in her story. I didn't know, but something in her face shifted at that moment. A flicker of relief mixed with fear, like she had been carrying a weight for years and finally found someone willing to notice it without judgment. Her hands were trembling, just a little, and she tucked them under her legs, twisting her fingers together. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept trying to disappear into herself as if she thought that would make it easier. But it didn't. Not for me. I wanted to reach across the small space between us and take some of that weight off her, but I hesitated, because deep down, I already knew this wasn't something I could fix. It was something we'd have to face together. And then she started telling me bits and pieces. Not everything, not yet, but enough to make my heart race. Secrets I had never imagined, moments from her past that she never shared with anyone, not even her closest friends. And as the story unfolded, I realized this wasn't just about guilt. This was about something much bigger, something that could change how I saw her, and maybe even how I saw myself. I looked at her then, really looked at her, and I realized she had been carrying this shadow alone for far too long. And in that moment, I made a choice, without fully knowing what I was stepping into. I was going to be there for her, no matter what it took. But as she leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper, she said something that stopped me cold. Something that made my stomach drop and my hands go clammy. Something that would change everything we thought we knew about each other. And that's when I realized the guilt she felt wasn't just about her. It was about me too. Her name is Claire, though I hadn't known her long before that night. We met through mutual friends, one of those accidental introductions that somehow feels like it was meant to happen. She had this quiet energy, the kind that pulls people in without even trying. And I've always been drawn to people with layers, the ones who hide pieces of themselves just out of reach. Claire was exactly that, a puzzle I couldn't stop trying to solve. Over the weeks we spent together, I learned little things about her that made her feel more like a story than a person. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the way she hummed softly when she cooked, or the way her eyes lit up when she talked about books she loved. But there were cracks too, moments when she'd pause mid-sentence, lost in thought, or when her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I'd notice, but she'd just brush it off with a joke, a deflection, and I'd let it go, because I wanted to believe that those shadows weren't mine to touch. Our friendship, or whatever this was built on late-night conversations, long walks through empty streets, and shared silences that somehow felt safe. She trusted me in a way she didn't trust many people, and I treasured that trust more than I could say. But trust is a fragile thing. And the moment she whispered that guilt into the quiet room, I realized how fragile our connection really was. Before that night, life had been ordinary. My own story was nothing dramatic. Long hours at work, occasional meetups with friends, the usual rhythm of small victories and small defeats. But with Claire, ordinary felt different. Her presence turned mundane afternoons into something charged with possibility, as if every conversation held the potential for revelation. And now, with that one sentence, she was about to reveal the part of her life I hadn't anticipated, the part she had hidden even from herself. I remembered a time, a few weeks earlier, when she had gone quiet after a phone call. She didn't tell me who it was or what it was about, just that it had left her unsettled. I had shrugged it off at the time, thinking everyone has things they don't share. But looking back now, I could see the first hints of this guilt in her eyes, a shadow I hadn't been able to illuminate. That's what made her confession both terrifying and irresistible. Terrifying, because I didn't know if I was ready for the consequences of what she was about to reveal. Irresistible, because I couldn't look away. I never could with her. There was something about the raw honesty in that voice, the way it trembled yet demanded to be heard, that hooked me completely. And then, just as she seemed to gather the courage to speak more, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced at it, her hand hovering for a moment before she pulled it back like it had burned her. The screen lit up with a message I couldn't see. Her eyes widened, and for the first time that evening, she looked afraid. And in that moment, I knew the story she was about to tell me wasn't just heavy, it was dangerous. Claire finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's complicated," she said, twisting her fingers in her lap. Her eyes avoided mine, flicking instead to the shadows on the wall. I leaned forward, heart hammering, because I could feel the weight of what she was holding back. The longer she paused, the louder the unspoken words became. "I made a choice," she began slowly, each word deliberate, like she was afraid they might escape her control. "A choice that hurt someone I care about." My stomach tightened. Hurt someone. I wanted to ask who, when, why, but I held back. There was a trembling in her lips, a quiver that told me she was still fighting herself about whether to say it. Her confession wasn't straightforward. It never is with people like Claire. She danced around the details, painting fragments of her story, a lie told to protect someone, a secret kept for years, moments that seemed small but carried enormous weight. And with every sentence, I felt the ground beneath me shift. I wanted to understand, to comfort her, but I realized I didn't even know what I was stepping into. I could see the storm brewing behind her eyes, guilt, fear, shame, all tangled together in a way that made it impossible to separate. And then she paused, inhaled sharply, and said something that made my heart skip. "I can't undo it. I don't think I should, but I can't stop thinking about it." That sentence, so simple yet loaded with tension, set off a chain reaction in my mind. What had she done? Who was involved? Was anyone in danger? Every possibility raced through my head, and none of them were comforting. I wanted to reach for her, to bridge the distance between us, but I also feared the consequences of being too close too soon. I tried to steady my voice. "Claire, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. Together." My words felt hollow, even to me, because I had no idea what it was, or if I could handle it. Her gaze finally met mine, sharp and uncertain. There was a desperation there, a plea I couldn't ignore. And in that look, I realized this wasn't just about guilt or regret. Something larger, more dangerous, was unfolding, and she had brought me right into the center of it. Just as I opened my mouth to ask the question burning in my mind, her eyes widened, and she whispered, almost too low to hear, "They know. They know." I repeated, my voice barely steady. My stomach dropped, cold and heavy. She nodded slowly, eyes wide, hands pressed to her chest as if she could physically contain the panic boiling inside her. The city outside our window buzzed on, indifferent, while inside, the air felt thick enough to choke on. I wanted answers, needed them, but the fear in her eyes made me hesitate. "Who knows?" I asked carefully, my words trembling despite myself. She shook her head, the motion small but full of tension. "I can't, not yet. Not until I figure out if it's too late." Her voice cracked. There was no bravado here, no attempt to soften the blow. Just raw, unfiltered panic. My mind raced. Too late for what? I pressed, though part of me already feared the answer. Her story, the guilt she carried, the secret she'd hinted at, it wasn't something small. It wasn't a mistake that could be fixed with an apology or a gesture. Whatever this was, it had teeth, and it had found us. Claire's trembling intensified. She tucked her legs closer to her chest, burying her hands in her knees. "I thought I could handle it alone," she whispered. "I thought I could keep it from hurting anyone. But they're already involved. And if they find out what I did, it won't just ruin me." Her voice dropped to almost nothing, trembling like a leaf in a storm. I reached out instinctively, but she pulled back slightly. Not away from me, not completely, but enough to remind me that this wasn't my burden to carry, at least not yet. "Claire, whatever this is, we'll figure it out," I said again, but I realized as I said it that I was lying. I had no idea if we could figure it out. And deep down, I feared that once the truth came out, nothing would ever feel safe again. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the faint hum of traffic outside and the distant sirens that made the city feel alive and menacing at the same time. Her gaze was fixed somewhere beyond the room, on a point I couldn't see. And in that gaze, I sensed the storm waiting to break. A storm I was now trapped in, whether I wanted to be or not. She finally spoke, voice quivering, almost breaking entirely. I think they're going to come for me." The words hit me like ice water. My chest tightened, and I felt an unfamiliar panic claw at my ribs. Come for her? Was it literal, or was it just the weight of her fear manifesting in words? I couldn't tell, and that uncertainty made it worse. I tried to steady my thoughts, to anchor myself in reason, but the tension in the room was suffocating. Every instinct screamed that something had already shifted, that the consequences of whatever she had done were no longer hypothetical. They were real, immediate, dangerous. And just as I opened my mouth to ask who, there was a soft knock at the door. Slow, deliberate, calm, but deliberate. Claire froze. I froze. And in that frozen moment, I realized we weren't alone anymore. The knock came again, this time sharper, insistent, like someone knew exactly where we were. Claire's face went pale, and she whispered, "It's them." I didn't know who them was, and my pulse spiked. Before I could react, her phone buzzed violently on the table. A single message lit up the screen. "We see everything. Don't try to run." Her hands shook so violently I thought she might drop the phone. I reached for it, and she yanked it back, eyes wide with terror. "It's not just about what I did," she said, voice breaking. They've been following me for months. Every move, every secret, everything. And now you know too." I felt a chill creep up my spine. My apartment, our supposed safe space, suddenly felt like a trap. Someone, or something, was already inside the circle, watching, waiting. Before I could ask a single question, there was a faint creak from the hallway, just outside the door. Both of us froze. Then, in a whisper that made my blood run cold, Claire said, "I think they're already in the building." The hallway was silent now, except for the faint hum of the city outside. My heart pounded so loud I was certain whoever, or whatever, was out there could hear it. Claire clutched my arm, her nails digging in, but I didn't move. Neither of us dared. Every instinct screamed to run, but where? The building was old, corridors twisting like a maze, and the shadows seemed alive, stretching and shifting with each flicker of the dim lights. Then the doorknob rattled. Slow, deliberate. A hand pressed against it from the other side, fingers tapping like a warning. Claire's voice trembled. "Stay calm. Whatever happens, stay calm." I swallowed, trying to make sense of what was real and what was fear. And then they entered. Not a group, not a faceless threat, but a single figure, impossibly calm, with eyes that didn't blink. The room seemed to shrink as they stepped forward, and I realized it wasn't a stranger. It was someone from Claire's past, someone I thought was long gone. "I told you I couldn't keep it from hurting anyone," Claire whispered. Her eyes met mine, filled with a mix of guilt and fear I'd never seen before. The figure stopped just short of the couch, coldly surveying us. "And now it's too late," they said, voice like ice. Time seemed to slow. I could feel Claire's panic radiating, and I realized the full truth. Everything she had hidden, the choices, the secrets, the guilt, it had all led to this moment. And somehow, in the chaos, I felt something strange, not fear, but clarity. I wasn't going to be a bystander anymore. I stood, placing a hand over hers. "We faced this together," I said. And in that split second, she nodded, and the room seemed to tighten around us. But just as the figure moved closer, a second door slammed open behind them. Another person, unexpected, stepped into the light. And my stomach sank, because it was someone I trusted completely. The room froze. Claire gasped. I realized in horror, the danger wasn't just from the past. It was someone who had been here all along. And in that moment, everything we thought we knew shattered. For a long moment, the room was frozen in tension, breaths held, eyes locked. The two figures, the one from Claire's past and the unexpected presence behind them, stared at each other like predators sizing up prey. I could feel Claire trembling beside me, but there was a glimmer of determination in her eyes now, one I hadn't seen before. Somehow, in the chaos, she had found her courage. The first figure's voice was cold, but now tinged with uncertainty. You shouldn't have brought anyone else into this, they said. But the second figure, someone I had trusted completely, stepped forward with a calm I envied. No, they said firmly. It's over. Whatever happened, it stays between us. She's done with hiding. Claire let out a shaky breath and straightened, finally meeting the gaze of the person from her past. I made mistakes, she admitted, voice strong despite the quiver. I own them. But I'm not running anymore. And I won't let fear control me. Or us. The tension in the room didn't vanish instantly, but slowly, the weight began to lift. The first figure, her past, nodded slightly, a mixture of resignation and understanding in their eyes. They turned and left, quiet as they had come, leaving behind an emptiness that felt strangely liberating. I reached for Claire's hand, feeling the tremor in hers calm under the warmth of mine. You're okay now? I said softly. She looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, a real smile touched her lips. I feel lighter, she whispered. And, somehow, lucky. Lucky. That word from the night it all began. The word I had said almost in jest, now felt real. Lucky, not because everything was perfect, but because we had faced the storm together. We had survived the shadows, and in doing so, discovered a strength neither of us knew we had. We sat together in silence for a while, letting the quiet wrap around us like a blanket. The city hummed outside, indifferent, yet somehow reassuring. Life wouldn't suddenly be free of fear or secrets, but for the first time, we knew we could face it. Not alone. And as we looked at each other, I realized something simple, profound, and terrifying all at once. Life isn't about avoiding guilt or mistakes. It's about confronting them, feeling them, and letting them teach you how to be better. Claire leaned her head on my shoulder, and I squeezed her hand. Thank you, she murmured. For staying. I smiled, feeling the weight of the past lift just enough to breathe again. No, I said softly. Thank you for trusting me. The shadows of the past would always linger somewhere in the corners, but now, we had a light of our own. And that light, fragile as it was, felt enough. Because sometimes, the real story isn't about the fear, the secrets, or the guilt. It's about who stays beside you when the darkness shows up at the door. And in that truth, we finally found peace.